Chris Paul has been out for weeks, but in the meantime, the Phoenix Suns have been playing incredible basketball. They are winners of 5 straight, and just about every single player on this roster has upped their game. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll talk about whether or not this Chris Paul absence might actually be a blessing in disguise. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Wednesday. We are here for you every single Monday through Friday. If it's your first time finding the show, go ahead and hit subscribe or follow. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you are, we are. Just go ahead and make sure that you see us. Hit the follow or subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell down below, get a notification when the show goes live, and drop a comment down below as well, answering the exact question we're talking about today, which is this Chris Paul absence a blessing in disguise? You probably know where I'm going with this if you've listened to the show before, but it's continuing to go really well. So Aaron Edwards is here, as he is every week, to stop by. We have not talked about Deandre Ayton's big week. We have not talked about much of this big winning streak at all, Aaron. So I want to get right to it. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by Sweatblock. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, you've got to try Sweatblock. Save 20% at checkout with the promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. All right, so they've been winning games, the Suns have, basically ever since we talked last, Aaron. So we have a lot of places we could go. They're on a 5-game winning streak. We last talked after the Lakers debacle with Patrick Beverley acting like a lunatic. He got suspended for 3 games, but setting that aside, they have been rampaging through the league. So I want to get to some of the bigger picture stuff here, but let's start with Deandre Ayton. He had I think 18-12 night against the Kings. Wasn't quite as great as he's been, but was still pretty solid. What have you thought of his performance? Because I did a big rant a couple weeks ago with you where I just said, I'm done waiting for it. I'm done waiting for the physicality. And I look like an idiot right now because he's been bringing that for 4 straight games, 5 straight games. He was the player of the week. So where's your head out on this stuff?
I think there was a clip in, I think the Jazz game where you can obviously see Book say dunk that shit every time. And I think it's something that they have just been saying to him. And I'm pretty sure if you say something to someone over and over, even if it takes 5 years, sooner or later, it's going to hit them. And it just seems like he's tired of hearing it. I think it was like at a tipping point when he had that terrible game, and I think he heard all the criticisms. He heard everything. And he kind of acts like he doesn't sometimes. But I think this time they were so loud. Everyone was so mad that it kind of forced his hand. And since then, I think it was the first Jazz game where he just completely disappeared. I think he just started stealing and putting his shoulder in people's chest and going over them and getting fouled, surprisingly. Like, this is the Ayton that we always wanted to see. And I feel like it's just, he heard everything. Like, we knew exactly what he needed to do. Everyone on that team knew exactly what he needed to do. It seems like he was the only one that didn't know what type of player that he needed to be. And he's finally doing it. He's doing exactly what we all saw for the future.
Yeah, in those Detroit and Utah games, he had 7 free throw attempts and 9 free throw attempts. He had a game against the Knicks where he had 5 free throw attempts. He only made 1. That was a little bit of a weird game. The fouls are down. He's taking just field goal attempts. Like, he's kind of just involved at a higher level than I think we've really ever seen before. Yeah, there were some ugly ones leading up to this. You mentioned the Minnesota game. He was 4 of 10 from the field, only had 6 rebounds. They won that game, but not very good for him. He had a 14-7 game against the Warriors. The Magic game that they lost, he was at 14-5, which is just unacceptable, really. I mean, so I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think if you listen to, we did talk about the last time we recorded the kind of whole monologue he gave about the Patrick Beverley shove and just kind of where his focus is, which is just, setting the tone, playing good, and winning games, not Patrick Beverley, not the Lakers, not any one night of the season. And he's had some quotes similar to that since he's been playing well. The one that kind of went around the Suns social media team was publishing everywhere was just that's how I've got to play every night. I have to be the one to set the tone and bring energy. And, that's what we've all been saying. I guess my question to you to kind of keep this moving is, do you think it continues? Because again, the Kings game was fine. It was better than some of those performances I listed off, but it wasn't, I was listening to the Timeline podcast a little bit this morning while I was at the gym, and they were like, it'd be great to see him go for 25 plus in 3 straight games. He's never done that, and he didn't do it against the Kings. So do you think, can he keep this up? Can he keep playing at a 20-10 level rather than like a, 15-10 level?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want him to chuck just to chuck. And I think that was what it was yesterday. I think if Book is going for 40, then you're not going to get those shots. I'm sorry. You're Ayton and you have been going off, but you're not going to get the shots that you probably want when Book is very obviously hot and he's very obviously going to end up getting buckets. Like, that's just part of the game. He still, rebounded decent against a guy that's a really good rebounder, and he still played really good defense toward the end. And he kind of took the physical matchup against Sabonis personal. You can tell when Ayton is engaged and he takes something personal. And that some of the pick and roll stuff where we're all mixed up in the first half, that was the entire team. So I don't put that all on him. But you can tell when Ayton is engaged. And I think that was also part of the problem is it shouldn't be so obviously when you aren't engaged. And when Book is going for 40, you're not going to get 25 points. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and he was dishing the ball out to shooters. He was making plays on the short roll. I thought he's still, he was a positive in the game. He was actually the only starter besides Book who had a positive plus minus. That doesn't tell the whole story, but I do think it's a good indicator. That Magic game I mentioned, he was minus 17, so the team lost by 17. He was a minus 23 in that game. So it can tell the story because there have been nights over the past couple of years where JaVale McGee or Frank Kaminsky or whoever had outplayed him, right? Like those minutes you could feel, at least on offense especially, the ball's moving better. They're setting screens. They're just playing their role, whereas Ayton can just disengage. He definitely has not disengaged lately. So I tend to agree with you that last night doesn't deter me, but also we've seen a week or 2 weeks where Ayton has felt really, really incredible. What we haven't seen is a month or a season, right? So it's it's kind of hard to sit here and say that in one direction or the other right now. But I do think, I've been harping on with that Utah game, that was one of the first times that I felt like he surveyed what was going on in the game, and he was like, they have no choice but to foul me. So I'm going to go get fouled, and I do think a little bit of a switch flipped with him in that game, whether that continues, whether he goes up against guys like Olynyk and Markkanen, who, they do only get to foul him. They don't have much else to do against him. There's going to be matchups where that's not the case. We'll see. The other question I had for you was, and this is a bigger thing, but I don't know if you have any thoughts. If he were to play somewhere between where he was at the beginning of the year and where he's been lately, so maybe 20% better than he's been in the past, still aggressive, but maybe not, piling up points the same way he has been. Do you feel like this would change how the Suns view him? Because when he was playing poorly, we were all looking at December 15th, January 15th. Is he going to get traded? Is as soon as he can be when the new contract thing is over. I don't know the answer to that, but it feels like they would probably think more about keeping him because the guys are thrilled. The other players on this team are happy when he plays well. There's no problems between the players, I don't think. And if he can keep this up, I think that everybody will feel more confidence in him.
Yeah, I think now if he's able to keep this up, it doesn't put a rush on it. I think James Jones gets to ask for more And that's just bigger in its own. Like if Ayton just stays at this level and he's still like very confident and playing with like aggression, I think that the asking price just goes up. It was going to be hard to ask a lot or try to get anything out of a dude that was disappearing during games. So I think just even if we have like decided to stay with him for long term and kind of don't really care about the January 15th thing or whatever, I think it's still James Jones can still put out a feeler and probably ask for a lot more than what he was probably potentially going to get.
Yeah, I kind of think if he does get traded at all, whether it's this season, which I at this moment very much doubt you're not going to do something that
happening.
big if you're still at the top of the conference. That would be just kind of stupid. But if it happens at any point, I've always thought it's going to be for a superstar. You know, you're upgrading from Ayton. You're not turning Ayton into a bunch of role players, at least now that he has the new contract. So, yeah, I think if he can do this in terms of the mentality and physicality that he's bringing, I would keep him. That's always been the thing. You don't need him to produce. This team has other weapons, which we're about to talk about. It's not even just, you know, he needs to score 20. It's just he needs to be engaged and setting a tone, like he said in that post-game press conference after the Utah game. And so long as he does that, I don't think anyone would be in a hurry to get rid of him. We just have to see if that continues. I have one rapid fire for you. People have been talking about Amare and Ayton's dunks looking like Stoudemire dunks, and I agree. He has this thing where his body moves toward the basket faster than his hands do, and that is what reminds me of Amare. Like he has these dunks where the ball like catches up with his momentum, and it's super fun to watch. Who's the one guy you want on a poster falling to the ground below Deandre Ayton on a dunk? Like if you could pick anybody in the NBA, I'm putting you on the spot, but who's the guy you want posterized by DA by the end of the year?
This is an easy one, but it's Gobert.
Okay. Yep. No, that was it. I don't think we need to elaborate whatsoever. That's honestly most of the time the answer, I think, no matter who you're talking about. But let's get into some of the other pieces as we talk about this absent Chris Paul stretch, what we've learned and why it has been a little bit of a blessing in disguise. DA going off, setting a tone, rearranging how we think about him. That's one part of it. I think there's several other pieces here. Are the Suns sneaky deep? I think we need to get into that. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by Sweatblock. Look, we know this time of year can be tricky in Phoenix because it's hot and cold at the same time, because we air condition, we heat, we don't know what we're doing. We put layers on, and then all of a sudden, okay, it's actually like 68 and sunny, and that doesn't actually feel great. I was at the Cardinals game over the weekend, and they had the roof open, and at certain points in that stadium, you would have sworn it was July because the sun was just beating down, and everybody's in jackets. Arizona winters are weird. Sweatblock can help solve that problem. Sweatblock gives you the confidence to wear what you want without embarrassing sweat. They are not a typical deodorant that's a stick that can break and fall apart. That's huge and clumpy. You have to remember to bring it in. Whatever, it is a wipe. So all you do is open it up, kind of like a wet nap, but not wet. Apply it under your underarm or wherever you need it, and it lasts for a week, is what they say. They've been featured and tested on the Rachel Ray Show by firefighters who are going in to obviously much more hot circumstances than any of us. So if you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweatblock today and save 20% with the promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com. All right, coming back here, Aaron, you and I were texting a little bit before, and Chris Paul was allegedly a full participant in practice heading into the Sacramento game. He was also a full participant in practice the previous week, and the catch was it wasn't a contact practice, so I don't necessarily know where he is with this right heel thing. It's a little bit of a mystery. I don't remember I was listening to talked about plantar fascia. It wouldn't surprise me if it was something foot-related because Monty did hint at it being foot, not heel. TBD, he seems like he'll at least be back relatively soon. Cam Johnson is slowly progressing. It seems like he's out of his cast. He's not using crutches, anything like that. So we don't know what the Crowder trade will be, but at least those two injured players will be back into the starting lineup soon. And when I look at how Cam Payne and Torrey Craig have been playing, it's kind of crazy to think those guys will suddenly be like your 6th, 7th, 8th men in a team that's at the top of the West. So you posed it to me the same way that I posed it to the listeners right before the break, which is this team low-key, secretly pretty deep after a whole offseason and feeling like the bench was going to be the biggest weakness?
Yeah, it's more surprising because, like, let's just say, like, Damian Lee was just stuck on the bench in Golden State. Like, I had no idea what his game was. I had no idea what he can bring to the table. But apparently, he can shoot the lights out, and we just didn't. Like, I've seen him hit threes with the Warriors, and then Steve Kerr, like, he's kind of got a short leash for certain dudes like that, and he would just pull them. Like, so I never really got to see Damian Lee. So I think, surprisingly, having shooting coming off the bench, which is something we definitely didn't have, and which was supposed to be Shamit, but we all know how that turned out. And I think that just having a person that can constantly get a shot and, well, not like get his own shot, but shoot pretty well coming off the bench. And yeah, the campaign, I mean, even last year when he got to start, when Chris Paul had that thumb injury, he played really well. So I think it's just he likes playing with the starters, obviously, but that comes with nobody on the bench with him being able to get a bucket. So it kind of closed him off a little bit because he was playing with Bam. I think the Jock thing helps a lot because it's a dude that supposedly can spread the floor. He'll start hitting shots at some point. We don't know. And I think that, yeah, like the bench is just surprisingly playing better than we thought they would. Yes, Book still has to play a lot of minutes with the bench after everybody else sits. So I think that's probably the one thing that I still want to fix.
A lot of minutes, period, Book has to play. Yeah.
So I think that's probably like the main thing trade-wise and the whole that we got to fix the most is Book having to play that, 4 to 5 minutes with the second unit before Damian Lee comes in. But yeah, for the most part, it just seems like this team is clicking and we have a lot more players than I thought we did.
Yeah, I want to get into the rotation. Damian Lee, on that note, I think he's clearly been like the biggest surprise. I think Craig playing passably as a starter, like I was worried when Cam Johnson went out because I'm just not a Craig guy. Like
you are not.
What'd you say?
I said you are not.
No, I'm not. But I mean, he's proven me wrong. Like you have not heard me say a bad word about Craig for like 2 weeks because he's playing well. All the stats have been moving around on the internet recently about how Craig and Crowder's numbers are basically the same exact thing, if not a little more in Craig's favor, which is kind of hilarious, while Jay sits in Atlanta doing nothing. But
posting highlights.
Posting videos, yep. That clock emoji the other week, I guess he moved on from that trade. He didn't want to go to Milwaukee too bad. I'm not sure. But he's been a surprise to a degree. I think campaign he's bounced back, but we've seen it before. I think Lee has been the biggest surprise for sure. And I'm working on a story for Suns.com about the defense right now that'll go up probably Thursday for people to read. And one of the things that people have pointed out to me with him specifically that's come up is I actually think the Warriors, like we think of Golden State as this team where everybody can come in and they're always going to play better because they're such a good team. They have a system. It tends to lift everybody up. But with him, I think we have all seen, like I think back to that Philly game when Tobias Harris was kind of giving him buckets a little bit. I don't think guarding one-on-one is actually what Lee's good at. And that's what the Warriors ask you to do because they're going to switch just about every screen. Yeah. Whereas the Suns, they ask Lee to go over, go under, whatever, just execute it in a more traditional way. And then he can just be a team defender if he's not guarding the ball handler, where he can just kind of swipe in for steals or just be in the right spots, just kind of put a body in front of people. And I think that actually has simplified what he has to do, even though you think switching is simple. It makes more sense for him. And I think that's been a big part of it because he's always been able to shoot. He's always been able to cut. He's always been a good ball mover. Those things never changed. But defensively, he's just able to stay on the court a little bit better. In the playoffs, teams are going to target him. We'll talk about that when it comes. But in the regular season, he's been huge. What do you think happens in the rotation when these guys do get back, when Chris and Cam do get back? Because you talked about it a little bit with Book having to play with those bench units. There's obviously the possibility of, Chris could come in for some of that time. There's potential to just go all bench, which the Suns didn't really do a lot last year because Payne was not playing well. But if he's continuing to be really good, then a Payne-led bench unit can buy some minutes on the bench for the stars who have been having to play a lot. And Craig off the bench sounds like a really nice luxury for this team. So do you think it's just business as usual, or do you think we see some more balanced minutes because these guys have stepped up with the starters out?
I think Payne plays well with bigs that can roll. So I think Jock's going to end up playing a lot more with that second unit finally, because I never know if Bam knows where his body is at any given moment. He's just all over the place sometimes. And yeah, as much as I usually don't like it, we could see like a 2-guard lineup with Dwayne Washington Jr. and Cam Payne. I think the points have to come somewhere while Book is shooting, and we can't just trust the offense for Damian Lee to get like shots within the offense. At some point, somebody's going to have to break out and get a shot on their own. And Dwayne is like the only bench player that's shown that they can do it. Even Cam Payne, to some extent, has to like play within the offense. So I think just having like a dude that can get a shot out of the offense, and he seems really confident doing it, and Monty is kind of letting him cook a little bit. I think that we can see a lineup like that. But yeah, I can see like the rotations getting maybe shorter. Chris Paul's not going to play that many minutes coming back. So I think you're going to still see Cam Payne with the starters a lot of the time. You might even see him close out some games. I think that's probably going to be the hardest thing, is going back to Chris Paul's pace. And he's not beating guards off the dribble. I think that's the big thing that Cam Payne brings to the table, is he can beat other guards off the dribble and collapse their defense in a way that Chris Paul can. He's getting into the lane. He's getting passes to the corners, and Chris Paul, it's not his game. He's going to not pass the free throw line probably, or maybe pass the free throw line a little bit. And that's maybe going to be tougher on Ayton. I've been saying it earlier, I'm not sure how much Ayton's going to like having to wait for Chris Paul pretty much. Like, he's going to have to wait for the ball to come to him. It's going to be at his pace. And that's probably going to be the toughest part, is him coming back, not really anything else.
Yeah, especially late in games. I think like the pace thing has kind of been a little bit of a misnomer with CP last year and then the beginning of this year. Like, you look at their time of possession and stuff like that, and they do tend to execute quickly. The ball gets moving, they run their stuff fast, and the shot gets up. But late in games or late in quarters, whatever it might be, those moments, like, we know Chris is going to go back to what's comfortable. And yeah, I do think that comes at the detriment of some guys. I think the thing to me that I think is the most important, I mean, one, I do think Dwayne Washington has earned some time. He's earned an opportunity. Maybe that cuts into Shamit's minutes. Maybe it's just here and there, like you're talking about, some lineups with multiple guards, multiple ball handlers out there. But I think the most important thing is minutes where Booker and Bridges are the two primary playmakers, because I think that's the thing that's been really exciting. Like, you look late in that Kings game last night, there were a lot of, from the beginning, Sacramento was just blitzing and doubling Book. Like, they knew we don't actually have much of a defense, so we're going to have to do this, right? And it worked. Like, it helped them stay in the game. Book had 6 turnovers. He wasn't very, in control, I would say. And Mikal was the one initiating offense. So I want to see more of that. Those two guys playing off of one another more so than Book and Chris, because we know that works, right? So I just want to I would want Monty to make sure those two guys get opportunities to keep repping that stuff, because it's going to be just one more layer that if Bridges can be at a place come playoff time where that's a legitimate weapon that he can initiate offense or be the, first ball handler in a bunch of, drive and kick types of things, I think that breaks the defense to a point where it can't account for everything anymore if those 3 guys are all at the top of their game. So I just want to see that. But let's talk about zooming out. JJ Redick on his podcast had a whole segment about how the Suns are the best team in the West and better than people are giving them credit for. I think he listened to Locked On Suns, because I did a whole show about it on Monday, that I think this is the team that's best equipped to win a championship of any in this era. And I want to bounce that idea off of you, Aaron. First, today's show, guys, brought to you as well by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting odds, analysis, and info all year long. Keep up with every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer, even esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, well, you can find those at BetOnline as well. I'm looking NBA MVP odds. This was kind of funny to me because Book is at plus 5,000. He is behind Nikola Jokic, Donovan Mitchell, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He is ahead of Trae Young and Damian Lillard. He's also behind Kevin Durant. So these odds are not really organized based on winning games at the current moment. And I know that's not how the NBA has gone in recent years, but I would expect books odds to get a little bit better for him as the time goes by. So if you want to get in early, that is sitting there for you. Plus game odds, World Cup stuff, everything. So head to the website today. That's betonline.net, or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Aaron, I'm going to just throw it right at you. Am I crazy to think that this Suns team is the best equipped to win a championship of the Chris Paul era, of these 3 seasons with CP in the mix?
Yeah, I think just because the upside, this was not the season that we expected. We were pretty down on what this team had to offer coming into it. And I keep tweeting it, 3 starters. This team is down essentially 3 starters, and they look like they've clicked. They're doing things that they weren't able to do last year. They're trusting in dudes that they couldn't trust in last year, or they didn't even give the opportunity to last year. So I think just having options, I think it's just the team that's had the most options on offense. Cam Johnson was pretty hot before he went down. Mikal Bridges is confident running the offense now. And it's just, we don't have Chris Paul kind of not dribbling the air out of the ball, but just running the same thing over and over. Because if you
sound like a Chris Paul hater, I'm not going to lie. Like, it's getting excessive.
It's not a Chris Paul hater, but everybody knows the deal now. They know his deal. They know what it takes. They know you're going to have to full court pressure him. He's going to be tired in the third and maybe not even have legs in the fourth. Everybody did that. Jose Alvarado annoyed the hell out of him, and it was working. He tried to act like after we won in Game 6 that it wasn't working, but it did, and everybody knew it. And then Dallas did it the next series. I think that now it's just not an option. He gets to play off ball. He gets open shots, and I think just having that as an option now, especially when every team knew what we were doing in the last 2 playoffs, and even the last time in the finals, Holiday was all up in him, and then he was all up in Booker. I think just having the option of not having those 2, having to hold the ball that much, is just giving us a bigger opportunity. And if we get another ball handler too, which I think we should, that's even better. I think it'll be the most ball handlers we've ever had, and it'll be the most comfortable we've had having the ball in other people's hands if we do what I think we're supposed to do.
I still maintain, and I brought you up on that show that I did about why this team is the best equipped, in my opinion, because as much as I agree with you, somebody like Jordan Clarkson or Eric Gordon would be a nice addition here, and I still think so. This team was always going to go as far as Bridges and Ayton took it in terms of who's going to be the other guys to step up, right? We weren't going to see a trade where somebody better than Bridges or better than Ayton got here. Once KD went back to Brooklyn, that was out of the cards. So to me, and Steve Jones, who does an awesome job threading games, putting videos up, he was going through the Kings game this morning, and he had a bunch of clips of what I was just talking about with Bridges at the end of that last segment of Booker's getting doubled, Booker's getting all this attention, and they just put the ball in Bridges' hands. And you can actually see, and he was highlighting this too, Booker's telling Bridges, giving him the ball back and saying, no, you are going to be the one to initiate this. And so to me, the coolest part of all of this, the reason that I'm not actually terribly worried about the trade anymore is I think Bridges is already stepping up to be what they need in that regard. And so, campaign stepping up, you never can have too many options. I'm not going to sit here and say, don't go get Clarkson, because he's just one more thing that the opponent's going to have to deal with. But I feel comfortable enough with where Bridges is, and then Chris Paul getting back. And then you throw in the way that they're beating these doubles and blitzes. They're doing it with floor spacers like Lee and Craig, who obviously we just talked about are playing really well. But imagine when that is Cam Johnson and Eric Gordon or whoever, Max Strus, my Lord, it's going to be really, really, really hard to stop when you also throw in the fact that Chris Paul will be there as a ball handler. We saw on opening night, Chris Paul didn't even have to close games, and maybe he won't all the time, even when he gets back. Because I think if we're talking about the team trending in the direction that it's going to, or that it is right now, they have other options. And so maybe, obviously, it's not just benching him for the sake of benching him, but if it's not working and he's okay with it, with his pride, then like do it if it's going to be what wins you games. So it's all going to be interesting to look at. Why do you think the West is so crazy? Let's close on that, because I do think, as much credit as we want to give to the Suns, a big part of why they're having the season that they're having is nobody else is stepping up. The East has two juggernauts. The Suns probably qualify as one themselves, considering all the stuff we've been talking about, that they're not even fully healthy and they're still outscoring teams by 7 points per night. But what do you expect from the West, the rest of the way? Is there a team that you feel like is going to make a push, or do you think it's going to be just as clumped in the middle as it has been?
I think once New Orleans figures out what their go-to is with Ingram and Zion, I think that they could still end up potentially 1 or 2 in the West. I keep saying I think we're gonna regress, but I think we know who we are, and that was my whole thing. I didn't know we would know who we are so early, especially when we had to try new stuff to be prepared for the playoffs, because we were always going to be a playoff team. I just thought that people getting used to their new positions, Chris Paul getting used to what we were about to ask him to do, which is we were spreading them out. He was getting open shots. He just wasn't hitting them. I just thought it was going to be a lot of that. But with the injuries and everybody pretty much knowing who they are, I always assumed that we would just kind of be in the third or fourth. I even said at the beginning of the season, I thought we would be third or fourth. But I didn't expect the Warriors to be this trash. I thought the Clippers were going to be way better than they are, and they're just really not good. And I was always pretty sure that just New Orleans, they just have so much talent. Their roster is so deep. And I just always assumed that they would be one of the teams to be at. I think even when we're at full strength, it's going to be a tough series if we end up playing them, just because they have really good defenders, they have good shooting, and they just have really good hoopers. They're really good. And with everybody else, I don't know what to expect from Memphis anymore. The Gobert trade was a disaster. I don't know what Minnesota was doing, so I don't know.
And Cat's out for 6 weeks. It just came down while we were getting ready to record. So that might actually help them to get one of those guys out of there. I could see that actually not being the end of the world, because they don't know what they are. But still, they're not what we thought they would be at all.
Yeah, I don't know what the West is supposed to. The Jazz are regressing now. They're finally
5 straight
playing
losses,
how we thought they were going to be. So I don't know. I think that once the teams that know who they are tanking and know why they are tanking and get because the teams that were supposed to be tanking were winning and all that stuff. I think now that all that starts happening, we'll start figuring out what the West is going to be. But right now, it's just mumbled up. It feels like we're one of the only teams that know who they are, on offense and defense. So yeah, that's going to have you prepared. Dallas is awful. I don't know what happened to them. So all these teams that I thought would be an easy 8, they're just all mumbled up right now.
I think once we hit December 15th, there will be trades. I think teams are going to, at the same time that it's obviously disappointing for a lot of these teams, I think they're going to look at it and say, we still don't necessarily feel like the Suns are some sort of behemoth team that's just going to blow everybody out. The Suns just lost twice in the playoffs. So they're not going to feel like they are scary like that. And then they could see it as an opportunity of, hey, this is there for the taking. The Suns are on a 57 win pace. So I agree. No one could have predicted that they would simultaneously develop all these things we just talked about today and be winning games and close to 60 wins again. It's pretty insane. The Eastern Conference has 5 teams with a point differential on a nightly basis of 2 points or better, meaning they're outscoring their opponent on average by 2 points every game. The West has 2 of those teams. The Pelicans and the Suns are the only teams that have really been able to gain any separation in that category. So I think that speaks to it, right? It's a 2-horse race in the East. Then there's some other pretty solid teams. Right now, it's a 1-horse race at the top of the West, and I don't see a lot of other really solid teams even. So it's good for the Suns. It's good news. They might have home court advantage a lot longer into the playoffs than we were expecting, but it also makes for you don't want to let your foot off the gas necessarily, because one of these teams is going to make a trade. They're going to make runs. Teams are going to be healthier or less healthy as the season goes along. That always happens, like we just said with Cat. And the Suns just have to keep being there. They got to stack up wins, as Chris Paul has always said. That'll do it for today's show, guys. Wednesday night is Suns Bulls. I will be there. I will give you a recap show afterward, and then we'll close out the week with whatever craziness comes. This team might do another workout session after the game. I really wanted to bring that up with you, Aaron, but we didn't have time. So that'll do it, guys. Listen to Locked On Sports Today as your second listen here on this Wednesday. That show's available on all platforms, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.